Hey everyone, and welcome back to our channel. When you think of the world's greatest explorers, who comes to mind? Christopher Columbus? Vasco da Gama? Ferdinand Magellan? Their names are legendary, but what if I told you that decades before them, another admiral commanded fleets so massive they dwarfed anything Europe could muster? A man who led 7 epic voyages, reaching as far as the shores of Africa, with ships that made European vessels look like rowboats. This is the story of Zheng He, China's Grand Admiral of the Treasure Fleet. Our story begins in the late 14th century. Born in the province of Yunnan, his name was not originally Zheng He, but Ma He. He came from a Muslim family, and his early life was marked by the turmoil of war. As a young boy, he was captured by the forces of the rising Ming Dynasty, led by the future Yongle Emperor. He was made a eunuch and brought into the imperial court. This might sound like a tragic end, but for Ma He, it was the beginning of an extraordinary rise. He was intelligent, loyal, and a skilled military strategist. He quickly earned the trust of the prince, who would soon become one of China's most ambitious emperors. When the prince ascended the throne as the Yongle Emperor, he bestowed upon his trusted servant a new name, Zheng He, and with that name came a monumental task. The Yongle Emperor had a grand vision. He wanted to project Ming China's power and prestige across the seas, establish diplomatic ties, and expand the tributary system, a network where foreign rulers would acknowledge China's superiority and offer tribute in exchange for protection and trading rights. He also may have been searching for his deposed nephew, the previous emperor, who was rumored to have escaped overseas. To achieve these goals, he needed a commander of unparalleled skill and loyalty. He chose Zheng He. Thus began the construction of the legendary treasure fleet. And when I say legendary, I mean it. We're not talking about a handful of small ships. Historical records describe the fleet as having over 300 vessels, crewed by more than 27,000 men. These included soldiers, doctors, astronomers, translators, and craftsmen. The flagships, the famous treasure ships or Beachuan, were said to be giants. While the exact size is debated by historians, some accounts claim they were over 400 feet long. To put that into perspective, Columbus's Santa Maria was only about 85 feet long. These were floating cities, packed with Chinese silk, porcelain, and other goods to trade and gift. In 1405, the first treasure fleet set sail from Nanjing. It was an inspiring sight. Imagine hundreds of red-sailed junks, flags flying, drums beating, stretching 4 miles across the horizon. Zheng He's mission wasn't one of conquest, but of diplomacy and trade, a massive display of soft power. His first voyage took him to Kampa in modern-day Vietnam, then to Java, Sumatra, and across the Indian Ocean to Calicut, a major trading hub in India. Everywhere they went, the fleet made a huge impression. Zheng He and his men presented gifts from the Yongle Emperor, invited local rulers to send envoys back to China, and established trade relations. They didn't arrive as conquerors, but as representatives of a powerful and sophisticated civilization. However, Zheng He wasn't afraid to use force when necessary. On this very first voyage, his fleet clashed with a notorious pirate chief who controlled the Strait of Malacca. Zheng He's forces decisively defeated the pirates, capturing their leader and securing the vital trade route. This action won him immense gratitude from local traders and rulers. Over the next 2 decades, Zheng He would lead 6 more incredible expeditions. His fleets charted new waters, traveling to the Persian Gulf, the Red Sea, and down the eastern coast of Africa. They reached places like Hormuz in modern-day Iran, Aden in Yemen, and even Mogadishu, Malindi, and Mombasa in what is now Somalia and Kenya. These weren't just brief stops. The Chinese spent time learning about local customs, trading goods, and collecting exotic wonders to bring back to the emperor. Imagine the scene at the imperial court in Beijing when Zheng He returned. Envoys from dozens of kingdoms would present tribute, and the fleet would unload treasures from distant lands, spices from the Spice Islands, gems from India and Sri Lanka, and most famously, exotic animals that had never been seen before in China. On one voyage, they brought back a giraffe from Africa. The Chinese, having never seen such a creature, believed it to be the mythical Qilin, a unicorn-like creature that symbolized peace and prosperity, a sure sign of the emperor's divine mandate. Zheng He's voyages were a triumph of naval engineering, logistics, and diplomacy. They connected China with over 30 different kingdoms, creating a vast maritime network of trade and cultural exchange that predated the European Age of Discovery by nearly a century. Chinese porcelain from this era has been found all along the African coast, a testament to the reach of these voyages. So why did it all end? Why didn't China go on to colonize the world like the European powers later did? The answer is complex. In 1424, the Yongle Emperor, the main sponsor of the voyages, passed away. Successors were more conservative and faced different priorities. The voyages were incredibly expensive, and a powerful faction of Confucian scholar officials at court had always opposed them. They argued that China was the self-sufficient middle kingdom and had little to gain from these costly foreign adventures. They believed the real threats to the empire were from the northern land borders, not from the sea. After the Yongle emperor's death, the expeditions were halted. There was one final voyage from 1431 to 1433, but after that, the era of the great treasure fleet was over. The imperial court turned inward. The gigantic treasure ships were left to rot, and the detailed records of the voyages were either lost or deliberately destroyed. China's grand maritime experiment came to an abrupt end. It's one of history's great what-ifs. What if the voyages had continued? How different would the world look today if Chinese ships, not Portuguese or Spanish, had been the dominant force on the world's oceans in the 15th and 16th centuries? We'll never know, but Zheng He's legacy remains. He stands as a symbol of a different kind of exploration, one based more on trade and diplomacy than on conquest. His story challenges our Eurocentric view of history and reminds us that the Age of Discovery was a global phenomenon. For centuries, his story was largely forgotten, both inside and outside of China. But today, Zheng He is rightfully being recognized as one of the greatest mariners in history, a grand admiral who commanded a fleet of giants and sailed to the far corners of the known world, all in the name of peace, trade, and the glory of the Ming Dynasty. Thank you so much for joining me on this journey back in time. If you found this story as fascinating as I do, please hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and ring the bell so you don't miss our next historical deep dive. What other historical figures do you think deserve more recognition? Let me know in the comments below. Until next time, stay curious.